With this painting, we get to think about perspective, which is something that's a little tricky to think about. I know it was one of my harder classes in college in drawing when we had to do perspective. So when we work on this background, we really want to make this white kind of orb highlighting center as pretty close to center as we can. And then we're going to make a couple V lines out to the corners of the canvas, which is going to help create our perspective for us. And then it's going to help guide the size of our trees when we get there. So another fun thing with this picture is you don't have to do the background blue. If you want to do a different color, go for it. It's just one solid color with a little bit of white highlighting in the middle. And because our background is all over color, we're going to do the watering down the canvas trick like we did last time. So big brush, just fresh water. We're going to give the canvas a quick bath. As a reminder, the water helps move the paint around so we get a nice thin layer of background paint and it doesn't get too thick. And a thin background lets it dry very quickly so we can paint our trees today and not tomorrow.
Today is good.
That's right. All right, so let's go ahead and take our palette and fill it up with your background color of choice. For example's sake, I'm going to do blue, but feel free to adjust. So I'm going to do about a silver dollar dollop of blue. And ready to roll with a quarter size blob of white. All right, you let me know when your paints are ready and we'll get going. Okay, all right. So if you can also tell, the path is a little bit of a curved shape to it. So we're gonna do circular brush strokes in the background. So we're gonna start with just fresh blue. And I'm gonna start in the middle and just work my way around in the circular shape just to help reinforce the curvature of our path when we get there. And you can always do half circles on the bottom and then finish it out half circles on the top. And because we have a solid background, if you'd like to paint the edges of your canvas blue or whatever your background color is, you can, or you can leave the edges white. That works just as well.
I would imagine our circular shapes matter less towards the edges.
Correct. Yep, I think that is accurate. And the trees and the leaves falling are going to take up a good portion of the painting itself. So yeah, don't stress too much about the circular shape. It's also just going to be a guide for us later when we do the path. Did you opt for blue?
I did opt for blue.
Okay.
I'm not quite comfortable enough to go rogue yet.
I think you are more equipped than you give yourself credit for.
I also feel like sometimes I have to make so many decisions when decisions are made for me.
There you go. I think that is a very true fact with why a lot of people like these classes.
Yep.
The directions are spelled out for them.
Yep, and nobody gets mad at you if you deviate from them, but
That's right.
you have a default.
So when you get to full coverage, let me know. We're gonna blend in some white while our paint in the background is still a little bit wet.
So I'm touching edges and making it.
Okay.
Okay.
So we're gonna keep our brush dirty, so we still have our blue paint in it. We're gonna put just the tips of the bristles into the white, and we're gonna try to find center as best we can. And I'm gonna start with small circles and kind of work our way out. And then once that white paint is gone, I would go back to the blue and start where your white ended with some fresh blue to help blend. And you can use the white as much or as little as you'd like to lighten your blue or have a deeper contrast in the middle. We are going to let this portion dry ever so quickly, because then we're going to wash our brush and do some more fresh white in the middle. So then we have a layer. Instead of blending in the middle, we'll have a little bit more of a solid white layer in the middle. All right, so I'm going to step on the other side of the camera to make sure that this white orb highlight is center enough for me. It's kind of hard to tell when you're off to the side. So I'm going to make sure that that's where I want it, and if it's not, then I'll come back with some white and adjust. Okay, it can be more circular for my liking, so I'm going to come back in and try to fix that shape. And it's tricky with blending color. I think the thing to remember is less is more, less brush strokes, the more color change you're going to see. And the more brush strokes you do, the less color variation and the more blending into one color you're going to find. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with this little white highlight center blob. And we're gonna let this sit and dry completely, so then we can really layer our trees in our path. So I'm gonna put my camera on mute, and I'll come back and check in, and we'll do a dry test on the paint before we move on.
Sounds good.
Hello.
Somehow my computer like connected to my neighbor's internet and not mine.
Oh shoot. Well, welcome back.
Like,
How is your background? Is it still shiny or is it drying?
a little shiny on the outside.
Okay, let's give it a few more minutes because I don't want our trees and leaves to get smudged with blue. So I'm going to give my canvas a little bit of a wave around here to speed up the process. We'll give it a few more minutes and then we'll come back and then we will do our guidelines for the path and practice making some trees. We will need all three primary colors to make brown. So if you wanted a separate palette with all of those on there so you can kind of mix up all your brown for your trees, feel free to go ahead and set that up. All right, a few more minutes. Okay, how about now? How are you doing with the drawing? Better? Okay. So let's take another look at our example. So we're going to come to the center of our painting where we had our white highlight. And this is about a 1/2 inch space in the middle. So when we start drawing our lines, we don't want to go directly together with our guidelines. We're going to have a little bit of a 1/2 inch space. So we're going to draw 4 diagonal lines, 2 on each side. So we're going to draw first the diagonal line that we're going to follow for the path, right? A little bit more narrow. And then we're going to follow a little bit wider here for our tree line. So we kind of know where both of those things are happening. And we're just going to use our small flat brush. And I'm going to use white because we're going to cover it up with leaves and path and tree. But just to give us some kind of guideline. And this doesn't have to be a solid line, so I would recommend just going from point A to point B and calling it good just so we can kind of know where we're going. All right, so we have our center. We're going to leave about a 1/2 inch mark. Our first line is going to be about that 1/4 mark down here at the bottom of the canvas. So just for an immediate guide, we got that line. And then we're going to mirror that 1/2 inch apart, guide over that way. Okay. And look, I messed up, totally fine. You can adjust as you go. And then the second line we're going to follow is a little bit less steep. We're going to go from the same spot. We're going to try to follow the same angle, but just a little bit higher on each side. Cool. So now that we've got our guides, I'm going to stick with this small flat brush for my trees, just so I can keep them on the thinner side and have a little bit more flexibility with their width. So I made a separate palette of our primary colors, red, yellow, blue, and some white, depending on how you want your brown to turn out. So just like last time, scoop a little bit of each color off to the side of your palette and mix a little sample together. And as you get used to mixing brown, you'll kind of get a sense of what color you're missing. If it's a little too green, that means you've got too much yellow and we got to add some red. And if it's a little too purple, that means it's too much red and blue and we got to add a little bit of yellow. And if you'd like to dabble with the white, you sure can. And we'll come back with black and white after the trees are in for some low lights and highlights. So this won't be the full color of the tree, but at least it'll be a darker tone. Kind of see my little muddy puddle I've got going there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Much more traditionally brown.
Oh, good. Excellent. So we're going to start with the trees in the foreground, the largest ones first. And just to take a look at the size of these things, the tree is probably 3 inches, 3-4 inches, and then they get smaller and thinner. So the majority of the tree is going to be the leaves and the dotting of the different colors on the top. So we don't want to get too crazy with the trees. And if you remember from last time, trees like to be the letter Y. So we're going to start with a base and end in 2 high points. So if we remember our guidelines, our top line here is our tree guideline. So I'm going to start here at the edge. I'm going to use the width of my flat brush as a guide for the beginning of my tree. And then I'm going to go off 1, off 2. And then you want the tree to cover that guideline just a little bit, so we look like it's actually planted in the ground. Cool. So then, again, here, you can do as many trees as you want. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 trees into the middle. But if that doesn't work for you, then that's totally fine. If you'd like, you can do your thinnest tree here, just to kind of give you a guide of how where you're going from thick to thin. And you can map out how you'd like your trees. And trees overlap, they do in nature, so it's okay for them to overlap here as well. 2, 3. Remember, they got to get thinner as you go back. 4. And this is where perspective gets tricky. Try to keep the trees straight up and down. There is a tendency to start letting them lean because you're following the line of the diagonal, but try to keep them straight up and down. I didn't quite get 8 in there, but that's totally fine. Just as long as they start to get thinner as you work your way back. They're going to look a little weird right now because we just don't have any leaves on them. But you've got that down. So same on the other side. So you can start building out your trees on the other side whenever you're ready.
Do you want to make sure to have the same number of trees on both sides, or does it matter?
I think that's totally up to you. Mine is definitely not. I think the more asymmetry, the more realistic it is in nature. I think as long as it goes from thick to thin, you're going to get that perspective guide that you're going for. How's it going with those trees?
I got all my trees in. I'm just trying to make them get smaller, so I feel like I'm having to make some of them bigger.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, totally.
But yeah, I'm close and can proceed when you're ready.
Okay, sounds good. I mean, the next step is going to take a little bit of time because it's just all the dots happening and the different layers of color. So I'm going to start with white dots, and I'm actually going to do the ground first because we want to fill in this gap here between our path diagonals that we drew and then the tree line. So we're going to do white dots first, then blue, then red, and then we'll go in with some white on top again to create some highlights in the leaves. So I'm using my small flat brush again, and we can for the rest of this painting. We might switch to the very detailed round brush towards the end to do some highlights on the tree trunks as well as maybe some smaller dots. But there's really no science to this. It's just creating a foundation, and it'll be nice as the paint is wet to let the paints blend. So when you move from white to blue, you'll get some light blues and then you'll get some dark blues as well. So white first, I'm going to start over here. We want to cover up our guidelines and create some dots in between and behind our trees. So we're kind of grounding our trees into this pathway here. And remember, we've got 3 colors and a second pass of white, so you don't have to cover every last inch of this space with white, but just get kind of a foundation going with your falling leaves. Okay, so with a dirty brush, I've got white paint still on. I'm going to go right into the blue and do the same thing on top of the white leaves, but also in the middle where we still have some blue background showing. And if it's too light blue, too blendy, you can always stop and wash your brush and get some solid blue. Definitely want things to overlap, want colors to blend. All of your dots can be different sizes, shapes, widths. It just adds to the variety of leaf and making it look more naturey. I am going to wash before I go to the red. So feel free to do that as well. Same technique, new color. Some of it will blend. You might get some purples, might get some pinks. And if you were hoping for more of a pink than a solid red, feel free to mix pink on the side and use that as well.
You are much faster at dotting than I am.
Oh, it's kind of hit or miss. You know, it's kind of fun to see how it ends up. And I actually spin my brush and my fingertips a little bit as I'm dotting to get a little bit of a different angle of the brush and variety of blended colors. And if you want, you can dab some into your pathway. We're going to add some texture into that later, but you can use that opportunity to kind of blur that path line too. And it's the same thing for the tops of the trees. So feel free to move up to the top part of your canvas whenever you are ready. I'm going to go on mute since it's the same technique, but please holler if you have any questions and start filling in the leaves. Try to still maintain an open space in the middle because we want to create that kind of airy passage through. So keep it left and right heavy and a little bit of open space there in the middle still.
Okay, thank you.
All right, you bet. How's your leaf adding going?
It's going.
Okay, cool.
I think we can keep, yep. I think I'm close to that, so we can keep going and then we'll come back and fill in more of these later.
Awesome. Okay, so let's do the small flat brush, and we're going to use the same colors we used in our leaves, and we're going to do those swooping motions here in the path to kind of make it look like a dirt path or been walked on. So I have a little bit of like globby colors that I've been mixing, so I'm going to start with that just so it kind of goes together. And after that, we'll come back with white to give it a highlight and black for a low light. So very loose grip on your brush, and we're just going to pull one side to the other. So try not to go back and forth, but we're going to pull left and then right, and then as the path gets bigger, your stroke should get larger. And then same thing with maybe a little bit of blue on top of or next to the one you just did. Still keeping that rounded brush stroke. Then I'm going to come in with just some white and help blend that in too. The goal here is to sort of cover up the blue base, but not completely. So we want to do enough swooping lines that we have some texture in our path, but we are still kind of covering up that background blue. Cool.
Does this go over the flowers or kind of into them, or?
A little bit into them, because we're going to come back at the end with some highlight leaves, and we're going to go over this to make it look a little layered, like a leaf fell on the path. And I'm going to go into that brown darker tone that I made, and I'm going to swipe some of that in as well. So if you've got brown or black or mixed brown, bring in a few dark swoops as well. And you can be as dark as you'd like. And if you said, oops, that was too dark, you can always come back with some white. And just as you mentioned a second ago, does the path go into the leaves? Does it stop? So I'm going to keep this dirty brush. I'm going to go into the red or the pink that you've made, and then just dab a few leaves on the path where it overlaps, just so you have a little bit of coverage here. Nothing crazy, very light and loose and minimal. And if you feel like you need some white highlight in there, which is also fine, you can add that along the pathway, some whites, just to help blend the two lines. I have divvied up myself some black because we're going to go into the tree trunks and add low lights and highlights. We want a fresh white blob and a black blob if you don't have one already. I'm going to wash my brush really well. It's a very globby paint and brush painting, so it might take you a second to give a good swirl to get all of the blue pigment out, or pinks, or whatever you're using. And for this portion, we want a really thin brush. So I'm taking my first finger and my thumb and kind of pinching the bristles together to make a thin line. And we will want to use a very light stroke on the paintbrush, on the canvas, to keep the bristles together, to have nice thin lines. So I'm going to start with black. I'm just going to tip the very ends of the bristles into the black paint, just a little bit on the brush, not a whole lot. And we just want to add some shadowing on our trees. So all that means is we're going to pick a side, we're going to draw a line down and kind of follow the edging of the tree. I know it's hard to see against the dark. We'll hold it a little bit closer.
Yeah, and you're staying on the same side every time.
Yeah, stay on the same side, but you can go like on the inside of the opposite branch, you know. Each tree should get a line, a swipe or two. And then obviously they get a little bit more abstract the thinner and further away the tree gets on the path. And then a good wash, so we can do the same thing, but in white. And the best way to show contrast with painting is putting a dark color and a light color very close together. So you're going to put your white stroke right next to your black stroke. So they will be buddies right here. You want to see both colors, and having the dark and the light together really helps pop out with the highlight and the low light. And if you start to get a little gray because your white brush dipped into the black, give it a good wash or a paper towel wipe so you can keep getting nice crisp white highlights next to your low lights. You can always come back in with some brown if you want with your trees. And the last little thing we're going to do is some white highlight leaves with the back end of the brush to give a smaller white leaf highlight. So just let me know when you are feeling good for that last part. Good? Okay.
I'm good.
All right. So any brush you want, pull it out of the water, dry off the bristles, but we're going to use the back end of the brush, and we're going to put that into the white paint. And same technique as adding the leaves before, but this smaller daub will help create a little bit of depth inside your other leaves. And as you use the back of the brush, the dots naturally just get smaller because of the paint coming off. So it's a nice way to create a tiny, tiny leaf, but still having it be asymmetrical. And with it being on top, we're not going to lose that highlight effect. And you can always do a few of them on the path or right at the edge. And with these kind of finishing, touching options, it's nice to take a peek at a distance to see if you've done too much or you need to do more. It's easy to kind of get in a trance with this kind of technique and do maybe a few too many. So stop while you're ahead and take a look at a distance to see if you need to keep going. And there you have it.
Good. Thanks, Loni. Thanks for
You're welcome. Yeah, absolutely. Have a good one.